Okay, while waiting, let us ask some of the participants about their expectations for this webinar. Is it okay? Let's have Miss Kabatuan. Can you please turn on your audio? Miss Kabatuan. Okay, I think Miss Kabatuan, baka may problema sa kaniyang connection. Okay, let's have Miss Ambal. Miss Ambal, can you please turn on your audio? Miss Ambal? Bakit ang tahimik ng lahat? Okay, let's have one of our faculty members na lang. How about Miss Mamarieta Antone? Mamariets?
Hello, sir.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon. Yes, sir.
Okay. Can we have your expectation today's webinar?
My expectation in this webinar to more information about the research,
Okay.
and then to Sir Kevin Conrad and how to give information to the users and also the other services that can get in our library. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mamariets. Okay. How about Miss Historilio? Can you share to us your expectation?
My expectations, sir, about the storytelling, search, gapon, sir, searching, then, sir.
Searching for information.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Welcome, sir.
Some more? How about Miss Abadies?
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
My expectation, sir, is to know more about how to do a proper storytelling to children. Then, siguro pang Sir Kevin, answer ka ng how to promote reading. Maura, sir.
Okay, since our topic for today's webinar is all about storytelling and reading. So you wish to learn more about the techniques, right?
Yes, sir.
On storytelling and then how to have effective reading. Okay, thank you so much. With comprehension, of course. I think we already have our speakers for today's webinar, for this afternoon's webinar. Hello, Sir Kevin. Hello, Ma'am Bea.
Hello. Hi, good
Welcome to
afternoon.
hi sir. Welcome to SMCC virtually. Start na. Wait. Okay. Okay. According to Edward Miller, founder of Edward Elementary, illustrator, and product designer, stories are our primary tools of learning and teaching. The repositories of our lore and legends. They bring order into a confusing world. Think about how many times a day you use stories to pass along data, insights, memories, or common sense advice. And I strongly believe that teaching a kid how to read will surely inspire him to lead. And for sure, a good book will help you feed a child a good deed. Maayong hapon sa tanan, magandang hapon sa lahat, and good afternoon everyone. Welcome today's webinar entitled The Power Duo of Storytelling and Reading. Before we go directly to our webinar proper, let us have first the objectives of the webinar. The first one, to acquire new knowledge on how storytelling and reading to improve literacy or learning. Number two, to know the best practices about storytelling and reading programs. The third one, to know how libraries and librarians can help in enhancing your reader experience. Okay, let me remind you about the webinar etiquette. First, you have to turn off your camera during the webinar to avoid interruptions. And you have to mute your microphone to prevent audio feedback during the presentation. Then, of course, you have to post your questions at the chat box. And then lastly, note that questions will be read after the presentation. To start with, let's begin the webinar with a pambansang awit ng Pilipinas through a video presentation.
Isang awit ng Pilipinas.
Now let us have the opening prayer to be led by Miss Lani Jean E. Lumugda, our circulation in charge.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let us pray and put ourselves in the holiness of the Lord. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given to us. We come to you from your blessing and guidance. May this seminar will be successful. Lord, forgive us our sins that we may have committed in thought or deed. Lord, we repent and we ask you to help us. Continue to keep us safe and protect us as we face this new normal situation. Lord, we humbly ask you to shower our speakers for your great inspiration, so that they share the most of their knowledge, and we also observe the knowledge experienced and put into our practice. This we ask through Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns forever. Amen.
Okay, let's have the opening remarks to be given by Miss Madeline A. Aninion, our basic education librarian.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a fourth webinar training. We're focusing about the storytelling and reading. It's real and substantial topic because we all know that the student and young people today are engaged more time in games, scrolling, surfing in Facebook, Instagram, and others because of the advanced technology. They really catch their eyes' attentions than reading and studying. Parents, teachers, and even we as a librarian encounter this kind of learning mood to our students. So sabi pa nga ni Albert Einstein, if you want your child to be smart, tell them stories. If you want them to be brilliant, tell them more stories. And according naman ni Robert McKee, storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas in today's world. So this training will teach and help us the different methods, techniques, and strategies in proper way in conducting storytelling to improve our library services, also to motivate and divert student attentions in reading. So, in behalf of our Learning Resource Center personnel, I welcome you all this webinar training. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Mads. I know you are all excited, but let us have first the introduction of the guest speaker to be given by Ms. Renelle R. Salem, our head librarian.
Ngayong hapon sa tanan, I am pleased to welcome you to the St. Michael College of Caraga Learning Resource Center. This is our first webinar for this month of November as we celebrate the 30th Library and Information Services Month. This year's celebration is guided by the theme Live Real means libraries relate, engage, advocate, and lead. About our session today, our two guest speakers will share to us their expertise and the best practices, and of course, their experiences of their advocacy through storytelling and reading. Our first speaker, I will introduce to you today, Miss Bea Yap. Oh, sorry. Miss Miss Bea Martinez graduated magna cum laude with a degree Bachelor of Science in Library and Information Science from the University of San Carlos, Cebu on March 2009. She earned graduate units for Master of Arts in Literature before taking and earning her degree Master of Science in Library and Information Science from the same university. She is currently finishing her dissertation for her PhD in English, with concentration in literary studies from the Suleiman University, Dumaguete. She is also the recipient of the 2020 NCCA National Commission of Culture and Arts Dissertation Research Award. Ms. Martinez works part-time as the head librarian and a senior high school faculty in Philippine Christian Gospel School. She also works as the deputy director of the Cebuano Study Center at the University of San Carlos, where she also teaches the undergraduate and graduate courses on literatures. Dear Michaelinians and participants, please join me in welcoming Ms. Bea Yap Martinez, RL.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good
Um,
afternoon, Ms. Bea.
is it my turn to speak now?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Miss Renelle, for the invitation. I'm always happy to speak about the things that are very important to me, which is reading and storytelling. So I prepared a simple presentation to share with you today. So let me just share the PowerPoint. Hmm, there you go. Oh, I can't share my PowerPoint. Uh, well, I can't seem to share my PowerPoint, so let me just. Are you guys? Is it okay, Mr. Nell, if I just upload it for a while, or would you want me to just present without a PowerPoint? I don't know why this happened. Let me just very quickly upload it. My apologies. Okay, so when Ms. Renelle invited me to speak in this webinar, I had a hard time. It took me some time thinking what I would share. At first, I consulted library books and I consulted primers on storytelling, but I decided to just do it in the form of a story. I hope that's okay with anyone, since after all, this is a story on, this is a webinar on storytelling. So let me just slide. Okay, I hope Can you hear me? Okay. When technology fails, we should just improvise. So I'm going to make do without a PowerPoint. I hope that's okay with everyone. So when Miss Renelle asked me to share in this webinar, initially I didn't quite know how to start preparing. So first I consulted library books, I consulted primers in storytelling, but I figured that you have probably read all the sources that I have read. So I have decided instead to tell you a story. This is, after all, a webinar about storytelling. So it is the story of, well, facets of my life as a reader, a book collector, and a librarian. That sounds a little narcissistic. To be honest, I only have a very modest personal collection. I certainly have not read all of those books, and I only work part-time as a librarian. But as I dip into different facets of my life, I will also necessarily dip into the more interesting stories, fictional and real, of others. And from there, I will extract some important lessons on storytelling, reading, and literacy. And that is the first lesson I wish to impart in this lecture. The practice of good reading and storytelling makes the dullest subject interesting. So how we deliver our instructions, our content, our lectures, that is also, we have the power to make the most boring subjects, well, very exciting and interesting. When I was 18, I succumbed to a reader's envy. I learned that word from my cousin, who was also my high school English teacher. She taught us the most beautiful words like makafushey. In Bisaya, very simple, it means lamaw or leftover food. They were useless words that she taught us since they were words that were hardly ever used. That's the second lesson I wish to share. Words aren't just meant for us to communicate, to get a meaning across to someone, to ask someone how much something costs, or how to find my way when I'm lost. Words are also meant to thrill us and give us pleasure, and this is the world of a reader. It is a world of pleasure and therefore a gift that we should share to others. Going back, when I was 18, I succumbed to a reader's envy. I found I could no longer read. I had spent most of my childhood reading, and I was bored of it. So during that time, I picked up a book that breathed new life to me as a dying reader. It was a novel by the wonderful French writer Colette entitled La Vagabonde, and in it, Colette described Renee, an aging dancer in the music halls, who receives a bunch of white flowers after her performance. She pins it to her breast, and she calls them her white anemic blooms. That's so beautiful. The poetry of that description seemed to revive the dying reader in me. The flowers were only cheap white carnations that smelled of pepper and wet dogs, but my soul was thrilled. Words have the power to bring to life something that is dead. It has the power to make even the most ordinary experience beautiful. That is our task as librarians. We aim to make experience beautiful for our students, for the younger generation, for young readers, for old readers, for new readers, for dying readers like I was. So I shall open this discussion by taking a page out of a book by Alberto Manguel entitled The History of Reading. So in the PowerPoint that is not cooperating, I prepared some pictures of paintings and sculptures of different people from different ages reading. The young Aristotle reading a book on his lap, the lovers Paulo and Francesca reading a book together, Virgil reading a scroll. So I prepared these pictures, but I cannot share it to you now. So Alberto Manuel said about these that all of these depicted in paintings and in sculptures are readers, and their gestures, their craft, the pleasure, the responsibility and power they derive from reading are common with mine, and I am not alone. So introducing someone into the act of reading, initiating someone in that act is it's often not done alone. Okay, it's done in the company of others. It's done through your parents. It's done through a friend, perhaps. But it is only really the librarian or the teacher whose job it is to do that. Okay, so that's what we're doing. That's our profession. So I discovered that I could read when I was 5. My sister, who was 3 years older than me, attended the school behind our house. I was too young to go to school, but my sister liked reading and often brought home many books from the library. I spent a lot of time looking at those book covers. They were Nancy Drew. And I kept on begging her to tell me what was hidden in the old clock or where the hidden staircase led to. She must have gotten very irritated at me because at one point she dumped the books in front of me before heading to school and told me that if I want to know the story, I should just read them myself. So I was very frustrated. I really had to know what happened. So I picked up the books and read them. So when she came home, she says she found a book monster. I had read all 3 books, although I have to be honest, I don't think at that age I understood much of it. And I demanded more books. And this is the 3rd lesson I wish to share. It only takes one book to create a reader, but it has to be the right one. As librarians, every request for a book from a reader must be treated by us as a personal quest. We are not just there sitting on our tables to fill out reference query statistics or teach them how to locate books using the call numbers. It is our task to teach someone to love reading. It is pretty much like a life and death adventure. The right book could instill in someone the love for reading. The wrong book could turn someone off from reading, sometimes for life. So that's a burden, right, that we carry. In our library here in PCGS, we have a reading program for students who want to read but don't know what to read. So we prepare a 1-page questionnaire, and there I ask them to fill out some basic questions like what are their interests, what are their dislikes, what books have they read, and of the books that they've read, which ones did they love and which ones did they hate, which genre are they interested in, and questions like that. So I give this form to the students to fill up, and once they fill it up, based on their answers, I draw up a recommended reading list of 5 books based on their answers. So the more, so from there, it is, we try to come up with what would fit their personality and their taste. So we also try to insert a not so generic question, okay? A question that will kind of try to reveal to them something about their personality. So this is how we as librarians try to help them discover books to read. Librarians, but also more than that, we have to have a personal connection with the students, because sometimes the questionnaire won't really give us a complete picture of who these students are. So librarians are better able to recommend the right books when we have a personal knowledge and connection with the students. So I know that is physically impossible to do, because in a school, there's one librarian and 700 students. So one way that I found for us to be able to address this divide is by starting a correspondence with the students to ask for my help. So when they give me the questionnaire, usually I reply in the form of a letter enclosed in an envelope. I write to them, I tell them why I chose the books that I chose based on their answers. I give them a little interesting or exciting synopsis of the book. And I invite them to write back to me after they've read it or while they're reading it, so they can also tell me if I was right, if I was wrong, or if they want to try again. So by this way, by establishing a correspondence with the students, this leads to, well, more meaningful connections and relationships with them. And that's why it is very important for librarians to read a lot. But I'm going to go to that later in another point. So going back to the story, since the day that I learned that I could read stories on my own, I have been on a never-ending reading journey. It progressed from Nancy Drew to Virgil to Homer to the Greek playwrights to Henry James to Charles Dickens to the Brontes to Tolstoy to Dostoevsky. Well, the list is very long. But the words on the pages of these books painted a picture of the world around me. In Gabriel Garcia Marquez novel, 100 Years of Solitude, he writes about an amnesia-like sickness that afflicted the inhabitants of Macondo. And he said, it came to them one day during their 100 years of solitude. They realized that their knowledge of the world was quickly disappearing, and that they might forget what a cow was, what a tree was, what a house was. The antidote, they discovered, lay in words. To remember what their world meant to them, they wrote out labels and hung them from beasts and objects. This is a tree. This is a house. This is a cow. And from it you get milk, which mixed with coffee gives you café con leche. As librarians, we provide them with the words needed to protect our memory, our past, our heritage, and our identity. It is the antidote to amnesia. So many people ask me, bemused, why I studied librarianship in my undergrad and graduate years. I never really know how to react to that kind of bemusement. So in many adventure stories, the hero goes on a quest to find the key that will unlock a mystery and reveal the solution. The library serves as that key to the quest and the past in a society. Librarians are like architects who structure knowledge and memory. The structure is logical, it builds upon one another. The structure of the library is like a riddle that can be solved. So we need libraries we need these libraries to preserve the stories of our identity, our nation, and our past. I hope you agree with me in that. So Alberto Manguel wrote that words, the names of things, give experience to shape. The task of naming belongs to every reader. The librarian is both the reader and the storyteller who relays to other readers the names of every lived and imagined experience. And this is the fourth lesson I wish to emphasize. Okay, I wish I had my PowerPoint for emphasis, but okay. The fourth lesson that I really wish to emphasize is that the librarian is both reader and storyteller. Librarians must read and read a lot. I have no shortcut solution for librarians or teachers when it comes to how to instill literacy and the love for reading in others. There's no way about it. In order to do that, we must read a lot for ourselves and for the next generation. Through our reading, we are able to shape the best kind of experiences for the younger generations. I learned this from an aunt of mine. I hope you don't mind. I'll tell you a story within this story. When I was younger, she was our favorite babysitter. She was my dad's younger sister. And there was something about her that was very dreamy. She had long, light brown hair. She had freckles that dusted over her nose. And her best features were her eyes. They were light and clear. My dad always described her as a romantic. And indeed, she was. For bedtime stories, she told us the story of Romeo and Juliet. She read to us the Song of Roland, the stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. But our favorite story was the story of Cyrano de Bergerac. Cyrano, if you're not aware of this story, it's actually a play written by a French writer. Cyrano was a mighty man, a man of wit, a man of letters. He was a poet, a soldier. He was everything. He could fight and win against 100 armed men. In debate, no one could beat him. But Cyrano had one fault, and it was a very obvious, glaring fault that you could not overlook. Cyrano had a very, very, very large nose. And this man with a very large nose was in love with the beautiful Roxanne. And his rival was the handsome but brainless Christian. So as we listen to my aunt tell this story, a story of courage, of love, heroism, and sacrifice, my sisters and I would often find ourselves sobbing at the end of the story. My nose is average. I have no great love for a handsome angel. But through Cyrano, I know that love requires self-denial and sacrifice. In a world that emphasizes self-love, how do we teach children how to love? And I mean really love. It is through the stories that we read. And we librarians, we teachers, are in charge of giving the right stories to the students to help them give shape to experience, to help them understand the world around them, to help them understand what it means to be human, what it means to love, to live, to hurt, to be sad, to sorrow. We give these books to children, and that is our task. So to do that, that will have to entail having stories to tell. Okay, stories that enthrall the soul, that make the listeners hold their breaths in anticipation. Therefore, we really have to read. Are you a librarian? If you're a librarian in this webinar, go and ask your head librarian to be allowed 1 hour of reading every day. Tell her you need it in order to help spread the love of reading. You need to have 1 hour of reading every day. If you are a head librarian in this webinar, I encourage you to arrange a reading challenge or a book recommendation challenge for your librarians. Create specializations. Appoint one librarian to specialize in children's literature. Appoint another one to specialize in fiction for older readers, in mysteries. So create specializations. Let them read, and read some more so that when we go out and select books, we know which books to buy. And when we are asked, we know which books to recommend. But librarians, we also find ourselves having to tell stories out loud. So it's not only about selecting books for children to read, it's also about having to read and tell these stories out loud. So to these librarians, I will give only one tip. Okay, Dickens wisely advised writers that when writing novels, one may make the readers, he said, let me just quote him, make them laugh, make them cry, but above all, make them wait. For me, and some may disagree, the point is not so much about providing answers to questions or providing a happy ending. The goal is to create a sense of breathless wonder. So when we tell stories, strive for that. Have them sit on the edge of their seat with anticipation, with excitement, and we can only create that sense of breathless wonder for others when we also feel excited about the stories that we're telling. So it's about creating excitement in readers, no? Like build up that anticipation, make them wait. So when we create that sense of excitement and breathless wonder, we do something more than create a book monster, like my sister named me. We create, and this is very important, we create a lifelong learner. This is my next advice. When storytelling, I really recommend that you bring the students to the library. In 2011, I think it was 2011, my friends and I, we formed a nonprofit organization that we called the Ambassadors. So we called ourselves ambassadors because it was a play of words. We took it from the idea of being ambassadors for reading. So we are a volunteer group of storytellers. And as much as possible, we hold our storytelling sessions inside the public library. Now, why? Why do we take the effort of arranging with different barangays to provide a bus to pick up the students, to pick up these children, to bring them to the library so that we can tell stories inside the library? Wouldn't it be much easier if we just go with a book to these different barangays? Now, of course, we do that also, but as much as possible, I really think it's best if we bring them to the library. The library is a place that supports lifelong learning. You don't let students stop with one story. Bring them to the library, read them a story, and then lead them to the shelves to discover their own stories to read so that they will keep coming back again and again and again. Okay? We have to show them that there is a place where you can find these books for free. There's a place that the storytelling, I open a book and I show them the wonders of a book. But more than that, I show them that there is a place that you can go to where you can find all these books. And when they do that, we create independent lifelong learners. And believe me, they will never stop reading for the rest of their life, I hope. Well, most of the time. Okay. So the act of reading also improves critical thinking. Dennis Diderot once asked, "But who shall be the master, the writer or the reader?" More than the pleasures that reading affords us, it also presents us with an opportunity to be critical thinkers. As readers and storytellers, learn not just to give the right answers, but to ask the right questions. During my high school years, I was homeschooled with my sisters and cousins. So throughout our entire high school, we were homeschooled. And we learned that one of the best avenues for learning critical thinking skills is through reading. So my dad required us to think, to disagree, and to argue with the authors we read. Sometimes this would be through discussions over dinner. Sometimes it was through written reports that he would make us do for the books that we were reading. A lot of times we would hope he would forget to ask them because we just want to read. But sometimes we don't really take the time to think about what we are reading. I remember having to write a report for Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas and a report for Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. This really forced me to think and ask questions. And as I did that, I discovered elementary truths to Les Miserables that a careless reading of it would not have given me. So I'm going to close this lecture with one last advice, one I am a little hesitant to give, being a librarian. As librarians, we teach students never to vandalize books. But there's a crime much bigger than the act of vandalizing books. It is the act of not thinking while reading. So if you come across a library book with exclamation points, interjections, scribbles, questions, comments on the side of the book, which we like to call marginalia, please do not find the reader. Encourage conversations between the reader and the writer. That is also our task as librarians. And that's the end of what I have to share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Bay. Where's
I don't know if I'm supposed to answer questions or I think we're supposed to go to curriculum.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma'am Bea.
Thank you.
Okay, before we go directly to the Q&A portion, let us have first our second speaker. Kasi sabay sila mamaya sasagot ng answers. Is it right, Ma'am Ren? Or ngayon na?
we will let speak first, Sir Kevin, then we will have our Q&A.
Okay. Okay, once again, thank you so much, Ma'am Bea, for sharing to us your knowledge and expertise when it comes to storytelling. I hope you guys have learned a lot, especially about the strategies and techniques when it comes to doing storytelling. Okay, because indeed, one of the services of the library is all about storytelling. Now, let's have our second speaker to be introduced by our head librarian, Ma'am Ren.
Okay, one moment. Sorry. Kansa naman na akong kuan. Ay, sorry. Ay, okay, so I will introduce to you our second speaker. Um, our second speaker, Mr. Kevin Conrad T. Tanshanko, RL. He is working as a product specialist for library management and security solution at Electronic Information Solutions Incorporated for 5 years now. He is also focusing in assessing and evaluating different library technologies for the benefit introducing and improving the country's library landscape towards technology advancement. The company is the leading provider of integrated library system and other library technology in the country. Currently, he is one of the board director of the Association of Special Libraries in the Philippines. He is the ASLP since 2018. In 2015, Mr. Tanshanko started his own advocacy movement, namely Magbasa Tayo movement. His advocacy aiming to introduce the importance and building of community reading centers and public libraries in the country. At the same time, he would like to encourage the society in building a culture of reading and the love for it. Since then, he's able to partner and help to almost 30 communities, providing them reading materials and professional assistance in building a library. Again, my Kalinians and participants, please join me in welcoming Sir Kevin Conrad T. Tanshanko, RL. Good afternoon, Sir Kevin.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, Ms. Ren. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'll just share my presentation first. Can you see my slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, can you see it full screen now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Super clear, sir.
Okay. Salamat. Maayong hapon. Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. First and foremost, thank you very much, Ms. Ren, for extending your invitation for me to discuss and share with you stories of our advocacy about storytelling and reading. Once again, Another thing I would like to also greet my fellow speaker for this afternoon, Ms. Bea. Thank you very much for sharing good stories and experiences in reading and storytelling, specifically in Cebu with your ambassadors group. I heard the group already about, I think last year with conference, and I'm so happy that we have this kind of advocacy, because the more that we have advocacy on storytelling and reading, the better, so that we can reach more and we can do a lot of things together with our advocacy and storytelling. And with that, congratulations with your activities, successful activities in your area.
Thank you, Sir
So,
Kevin.
so this afternoon, most likely, I'll be sharing with you my experiences in terms of advocacy and at the same time in promoting storytelling and reading. I just want to share with you, I'm a fan of photos. So as you can see in my slide, I have here different photos of my sessions in storytelling and playing with kids in other areas of the country. Like on your left side of the screen, it's in Antique. On your right side, it's in Cebu. And the other one is Antique again. I love kids in terms of working with kids in terms of storytelling and encouraging them to read with the resources that is present and it's available for them. So to those who don't know me, I'm Kevin Conrad Titan Shonko. I'm a library and reading advocate since 2015. Why 2015? After all these years that I've been alive in the world, I can only say that I started to become an advocate in 2015 because that's where that's when the year where I understand more about the importance of library and reading and storytelling. To tell you a story, I'm a probinsyano. I came from Sibuyan Island, Romblon, which is 10 hours away from Batangas, going to Manila, which is through ship. I finished my elementary and secondary education in that island without libraries and without other reading materials aside from the textbooks that was provided from a public school. And that time, I don't understand why or what is the importance of reading to us, aside from those textbooks that we need to consult when we have assignments and the like. We don't have any experience in reading fiction books because there is no available one in the island. And at that period of time when I was studying in that island, I did not think that I'll be taking librarianship in college. I did not think that I'll be doing the things that I'm doing right now as an advocate. And I can say that I am a late bloomer, or I'm a late bloomer in terms of collecting books, reading books that I wanted, and at the same time, create an awareness on why library and reading is important. And hopefully this afternoon, I can share with you some points where you and each and everyone at this webinar could be able also to do an advocate for the love of reading and libraries through storytelling. Before that, I wanted to introduce to you the movement that I started in 2015. Magbasa Tayo movement started as a one volunteer movement, and that's only me. It's a non-profit organization that advocates on the importance of reading and libraries. MTM believes that through accessible libraries, people can enjoy and love reading. MTM also believes that libraries can help in nation building and in recording success stories in different communities. And then started in 2015, I was able to introduce it to my family and they supported me. So technically speaking, our movement is a family-run advocacy up to this time. I can say family-run because my parents and my siblings and even my cousins extended their support and joined me in getting donation of books from different partners and sending it to different communities who would love to have it. My story started when I finished a degree of Library and Information Studies or Science in the University of the East, which I became a student assistant for 3 years. The university trained me to be a storyteller, to be a host in all library activities that we have, and at the same time, do the library orientation for our first year students in the university. That's where I was able to train myself and I was trained by the university to be equipped with the skills that I need for storytelling and for hosting, and at the same time for public speaking. Ayala Young Leaders is a national leadership training of the Ayala Group of Companies. And in the Philippines, out of 800 applicants, luckily, with hard work and perseverance, I was able to be part of the 2015 delegation with 81 students around the country. When this leadership training concluded, we need to throw a starfish project. I started a starfish project focusing on libraries because with the 81 delegation, I'm the only librarian or library science student, and technically, I'm the only one who proposed and started or visualizing a project on the importance of libraries. And in that same year, we donated about 500 volume of books as a starting donation to a community here in Manila where I'm residing. And to tell you honestly, the barangay hall or where we are residing, it's really in front of our house. So for me, it's easy to communicate with the barangay officials, with local youth officials to introduce the project that I wanted to start. And thankfully, they accepted it well, and they're very happy to share it with the community. I would love to share with you what is storytelling by Gomez in 2000. Storytelling is the art of language, vocalization, and our physical movement and gesture to reveal the elements and images of a story to a specific live audience. And at the same time, a central unique aspect of storytelling is its reliance on the audience to develop specific visual imagery to detail, complete, and co-create the story. I have a storytelling manual here that I purchased from Adorna. It's a storytelling manual for young children, written by Madonna G. Gomez and Caroline Sacris, that will guide you in your journey to storytelling. I started storytelling without even a technical training or workshop on how to do it. As long as I can remember, I only wanted to speak in front of a crowd. And that started my storytelling journey. Storytelling for me is a way for us to it's a way for us to let children know about different stories. If they are non-readers, we can tell stories. At the same time, if they love stories, we can tell stories. Storytelling is a way for us to open the imagination of our children. And I am also, the time that I understand storytelling, I'm encouraging parents to do it at home because I believe that learning and everything that will affect your children's life would be coming from your home. Especially this time that majority of our classes is made at home, online, and the like. Most of the time, parents are there with children, talking, sharing, and maybe that's a good opportunity also for parents to tell stories about their children. If you are planning to be a storyteller, don't be afraid to do so because even without training or without workshop and storytelling, you can start doing so. The first tip that I'm going to say or to give you is that you can start storytelling with your heart, with your passion to tell, because we are a library of our own stories. As one speaker said in one of the webinars I've attended, we have a lot of stories in ourselves, and we can tell it to anybody. I always say that may kwenta ang kwento mo. because you can start with your own story. But with the availability of different storytelling books in your library, in your communities, or even at home, you can start by reading it aloud to your children or to your students and the like. And if you really wanted to be one of the storytellers, I would recommend for you to attend storytelling workshops to know different aspects in storytelling to make it more effective when you do the sessions with your listeners. Reading is a number of interactive processes between the reader and the text in which readers use their knowledge to build, create, and to construct meaning. In Magbasa Tayo movement, we focus more on the availability of reading materials. Because for your information, just as what I've experienced, one island in the province or in the Philippines don't have any available libraries where we can read or we can visit to get more books and reading materials. One that I've observed in the Philippines is that, and based on some research about readership, Filipinos loves to read. Unfortunately, there is no enough numbers of reading materials available for them or to each community. That's why we are advocating for the presence and for the availability of reading centers and libraries in the Philippines. And we are happy to tell you that for the 5 years that we're working with the movement, we're able to reach about 30 institutions and communities that we serve. The farthest is in Basilan, the City Library of Lamitan. We provided some of the reading materials. And just last August, we were able to extend about 1,000 of volumes to 13 schools and primary and secondary in Cebu and Romblon to extend help for their distance learning and to be able to add to their supplemental reading materials in each school. Reading is an experience. Reading can be a way for us to open the world of imagination to every readers that we wanted to reach. And at the same time, we can encourage children to create an environment that reading is part of their daily life. As what Ms. Bea earlier said, at least 1 hour every day, we start reading. And I would agree with her that as librarians, we need to be the first one to experience the beauty of reading. And after that, we can recommend, we can suggest well to our readers. Our vision, what we want to achieve and why we advocate for reading and for libraries and storytelling, it's to build more accessible libraries, especially in far-flung areas or communities. What we wanted at first is to make our reading centers and libraries available in every community. And what I've said in one interview to me, as long as we can, as long as we have the opportunity, as long as we have the materials and the resources, we will try to extend our help to those communities who would love to have reading centers in their communities. We partner with local community officials in the establishment of their own reading centers to make it available on them. We have, for our experience, we even extended a storytelling kit to 6 teachers in a Mangyan community in Kinumay, Mansalay, Mindoro, so that they could start having their storytelling session with the kids. We dream of a Philippines with a functional libraries in every community. I know that this is very idealistic, most likely, and could be a question if it's possible, but I continue to dream. I continue to dream because through dreaming and through dreaming and dreaming again, I think we can make it work and we can make this dream possible through partnership, through our listeners this time in a webinar that's hearing our advocacy. We know that one day we can reach this dream, maybe not in my lifetime that I'm here on the world, but maybe for future generation that will continue to advocate for the same. We can reach this dream. That the Philippines will have a functional libraries and we can build a reading of culture to to our Filipino people. Storytelling based on the manual that I'm reading can also develop and further help our readers and listeners to verbal communication skills. Becoming verbally proficient can contribute to a child's ability to resolve interpersonal conflict non-violently. Negotiation, discussion, and tact are peacemaking skills. Being able to lucidly express one's thoughts and feelings is important for a child's safety. Clear communication is the first step to being able to ask for help when it is needed. So through storytelling, because most likely in storytelling, it's a two-way communication as a speaker, the storyteller, and as a reader. You are creating a good verbal communication with your listeners. Me, myself, I'm a fan of storytelling books. I keep it on my personal shelves. I read those books. That's why I'm telling you, reading is not only for those big books that we have on store. You can start reading your magazines. You can start reading your comics. You can start reading your storytelling books who only have 12 to 15 pages. And maybe you could enjoy and you start your reading journey with those materials, and it's okay. Another one, we are developing a child's imagination. If we start early reading to them, sharing with them stories that would fascinate them, both telling a story and listening to a well-told tale encourage children to use their imagination. Developing the imagination empowers children to consider new and inventive ideas. And I think through storytelling, you are opening different perspectives to our listeners or to our children's mind. And lastly, weighing consequences of one's action. Storytelling based on traditional folktales is a gentle way to guide young people toward constructive personal values by presenting imaginative situations in which the outcome of both wise and unwise actions and decisions can be seen. So I have this, for example, my favorite book for storytelling is Araw sa Palengke. It's a story of a parent and a child goes to a palengke for a Sunday morning or for a morning that they go together to a market to buy their needs or their food and the like. And the mom told her child not to point anything in the market. So as you can see, aside from telling stories, you are putting values that could possibly affect children's values or action in the long run. So storytelling is a good, what I can say, it's a good way to share values in our culture in the Philippines and the like. And at the same time, I would encourage you to use also good Filipino stories because we have a number of good authors in the Philippine literature where you can use for storytelling. And at the same time, we are supporting our own writers and authors. Next, let's go to reading. Reading has also its own importance of why we need to read and how reading can help us. First, books make us better communicators. As you can see, majority or some of the richest person around the world, like Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, and then Bill Gates, they credit everything that we have learned through reading. They credit the success that we have right now through reading. And I think you can see for them that they are good communicators, which could be possible be credited to the books that we have read in their past times. So because books improve our vocabulary, our communication skills improve, reading enhances our language skills and develop fluency, and allowing us to express our thoughts and ideas better. Another one, books educate us. To those things that we were not able to learn from the classroom or in the library and the like, maybe books can share with you, and maybe books can help you to educate you for a certain topic. Books is a quench our thirst for knowledge. Through books, we learn about how things work, understand different cultures, and comprehend the history of things. We can learn new languages, how to improve ourselves, and even how to build things. The right books are full of information that helps us become smarter, sharper, more skilled, and more open to new ideas. Even though there's a large information that we have online right now, I still do encourage you to read your printed books. Why? For some reason that books are well-published material, and at the same time, it was reviewed by experts, it was reviewed by scholars, especially for some opinionated matters on the different topics. I would recommend you to read the printed one because in my own preference, in my own opinion, I have more trust to printed copies, unlike others online. Especially that online we cannot. Good thing we are librarians. We can evaluate and assess. But to those who are not librarian, it's hard for them to look for the right information online because we have different platforms and anyone can publish anything that they wanted to give opinion online. Another thing that reading is important is that books keeps our brains healthy. They said that physical exercise is for our body and for our brain it's reading. I agree that reading can help us avoid Alzheimer's or dementia in the future. And mental stimulation keeps the blood flowing to our brains, preventing diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's. When we read, our cognitive function and memory improve. The healthier your brain is, the more you're able to focus and develop your analytical skills and at the same time your critical thinking. I am a fan of Bo Sanchez's books. I read a lot of the self-help books that he published and more on leadership and motivational books. And I think I credit my I credit what I know right now, what I am sharing to every talk that I've attended and presented to the books that I've read in terms of self-motivation and at the same time in leadership. Aside from that, books also reduce stress, books motivate us, and books stimulate creativity. I always say on my talk about the value of reading and books that a book is a good friend. A book is a best friend. Why? Because the book will not judge nor discriminate you. It will only provide you with all the information that you wanted to read from that material. And I think a good book, a well-chosen book by yourself is worth investing, worth keeping, and worth collecting. Before I don't have the resources to buy my own books because personally speaking, books is quite expensive, right? We need to buy it on a national bookstore and the like. That's why we are encouraging to every community to have a library so that reading will be free. And reading will, those libraries will have universal access to information that everyone needs in a small community, in a far-flung community in the Philippines. So they don't need to have to purchase books of their own because the library is present in the community. And that's what we are dreaming for the Philippines, so that reading resources and materials are available anytime for free to all those persons who would love to read. So as what I've shared earlier, the 2017 National Book Development Board Readership Survey says that 80% of Filipinos age 18 and older read books, and they want to read books. But technically, not all communities have the resources that they wanted to read. And hopefully in the long run, with us advocates, with us librarians, and to those who understands the gap that we wanted to build and we wanted to solve, and with the help of our government by introducing this type of advocacy, we can build a country that everyone has the access to reading materials. How we work, thankfully, we have partners. For the 5 years that I'm working with advocacy and with my work, I was able to partner with great advocate also for libraries and reading. We partners with Library Renewal Partnership. I am making a difference. my own university, the University of the East Department of Libraries and the Library Alumni Association, Books for a Cause. Right now, we are even partnering to Sangguniang Kabataan and to other school libraries who plan to donate their books, new books and even old books that can be still used. And we also support the advocacy of World Vision with DepEd about the Brigada Pagbasa, encouraging reading to our communities and our children. At first, we think of a way that what we wanted to advocate, is it technically on reading, how to teach kids to read and the like. But upon evaluation and checking, the main problem is that the presence of reading centers. And that's why we are starting with advocating on the presence of libraries, reading centers, and reading materials in each community. And we try ourselves to train the in charge or the officials in terms of reading programs, read aloud, like storytelling and the like. It's just that as of this moment, we have a lot of limitations in terms of movement in doing this advocacy work because of COVID. But I hope that after COVID, we can continue to train our partners with our communities and our libraries to function well and to start doing their reading programs. At the end of my presentation, I would love to end it with a quotation or a saying from Theodore Roosevelt. He quote that, "Do what you can with all you have and where you are." I always encourage advocates to start it with their communities. You don't need to join us. You don't need to join a certain advocacy movement. You can start your own advocacy within your communities because that's where they need you. And that's the nearest community that you can help. Go out, start talking with your co-advocates or fellow volunteers or co-volunteers with local officials and start discussing about this great cause for the love of reading through storytelling, through the presence of reading centers in your communities, and start with what you have. Start with the talent and skills that you have. Start with the partners that you have, where you can partner for books, where you can get donation from your books. And I most likely, one day, we can fulfill our dream in putting reading centers and libraries in each community in the Philippines. So with that, thank you very much for this opportunity and sharing our love for reading and our love for storytelling and with the advocate that we are doing. And hopefully, after this, to all the participants, you were able to think of a way. If you are not a reader this time, start reading. Little by little, you will be a fan of reading. And at the same time, if you have the talent and skill, start checking yourself, doing storytelling. Maybe that's your talent that you are not exercising before. Maybe you have that kind of talent in you. So together we can build a country that loves reading. Together we can create the culture of reading in this beloved country, the Philippines. Once again, thank you very much. Madamo gini salamat. Good afternoon.
Madamo po na salamat, sir. That's why we are really amazed by you, sir, because of your courage and initiative when it comes to empowering reading and literacy. Okay, indeed, through reading, we can be smarter. As simple as that, right? So now, this is all you have been waiting for. Of course, the question and answer portion. I hope our speakers are always ready to answer your question. Now, let us have here some questions na nandito na sa chat box natin. We have here a question from Ms. Roxanne Sigahan. how can we apply storytelling in our careers in the near future? And second, please identify what are the positive aspects of storytelling. Let's start with Ma'am Bea.
Okay, good afternoon, Ms. Roxanne. How can we apply storytelling in our careers? Society revolves on stories. So whether we are um, how do I say this? Storytelling is like an exercise in rhetorics. So when we try to persuade through stories someone to agree with us, so we try to capture their emotions so that we can convince them to agree with us. So really, it's applicable in any areas of our careers. When we a story, it does not merely have to be using storytelling as a means of just sharing reading from a book. So we do storytelling even in when we relate to our friends, when we talk to our boss, when we talk to our clients. We The act of storytelling is always present. But I think it's even more important because when we already have a career, we are able to also give back to the community. And I think everyone should use this position of privilege that we have to be able to give back to the community by storytelling. So not only to help us in our careers, but also to help and give back to society. So the example Sir Kevin gave, his experience in advocacy work, is very important because it's advocating literacy and storytelling and reading. Really, all we need is a book and a storyteller. So it's very easy, and through that we are able to immediately give back to society. So I think that's perhaps a little shift in perspective. It's more on in our position of privilege already, when we already have our careers, how do we give back to society? Really, all it takes is a book and a reader and a storyteller. So that's what I think. Positive feedbacks on storytelling. They say that the eyes are the windows to person's soul, and I think it's true. Um, when I am telling a story, I see the eyes of the kids looking at me, very excited. I used to have I have little cousins, or they're big now, but I had cousins. There were three of them, Amanda, Isha, and Johan, and they were a lot younger than me. And they were always asking for stories. They'd go from one cousin to another asking, please tell us a story, or do you have another story to tell? And we created this idea where I tell them, okay, we have this huge castle. And in this castle, if you want to know a story, we enter that castle and you have to pick a room number. And we pick a room number, we go inside, we don't know what story awaits for us there. So sometimes we choose room number 401 and we go inside and I say, okay, this is too scary. So we close the door, we go to another room number. And I can always see in their eyes that anticipation. Like they're always wondering, okay, what comes next? Or the reactions when they groan over something, when they don't like the ending, when they insist that they should change the ending. And children are very expressive, so I think the feedback from storytelling, we see it immediately. They don't know how to lie, or well, they don't know how to hide their emotions, so we can see it very clearly in their eyes. The feedback from children it's instant. So that's what I think.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Kaya nga meron ako nabasa na quote ba yun na it's about the difference between marketing and storytelling. Much better pa daw ang storytelling if you compare it to marketing. Because it speaks the truth. It's very relatable. Okay, how about you, Sir Ken?
Okay. First, I really agree with Bey mentioned earlier with regards to the career to storytelling. One thing is for sure that One, you can start with the culture of the Philippines. Filipinos love stories. Filipinos love chicas, right? Filipino loves different stories along the way, even through neighbors. And as you can remember, in the past times of the Philippines, history was even passed by one person to another until it was written. So I think stories are very important in all aspects of our lives because stories can be able to inspire. Stories can be able to elevate someone from stress or from depression or what. We have this called bibliotherapy, the therapy through books. Um, One maybe specific that can have a career in storytelling. If you are working in a school library, it's very important that you know how to do storytelling because this is one of the main activities that we do in school libraries. But aside from that, um, stories or telling stories will help you in all aspects of your work because as Ms. Bea mentioned earlier, when you speak to your boss, when you tell something that you wanted to do in your library, it would be better if you do it in a storytelling way so that your boss or your administration most likely would understand the concept and would understand why you wanted to have that kind of services in the library. At the same time, through experience, when we tell stories of our own with regards to advocacy and the things that we do, a lot of persons or a lot of kids are too excited to know more about your next story. So I'm not so sure if it's the same to all kids that we have, but based on experience, when we tell stories, you should have at least 3 to 4 books with you dahil hindi matatapos yung isang libro lang. They will keep on telling and ask you to tell another story, even though wala namang storytelling before. So even it's their first time to hear, they would be very excited. That's why we have that hope and we have this dream with our advocacy and advocates that reading and storytelling will really be a good part or lifestyle of a kid. It's just that hindi siguro ginagawa ng parents nila sa bahay. Hindi ginagawa madalas sa kanilang storytelling. Pero kapag ginawa mo na yun sa kanila, they would enjoy it and they would really want to have it another session with you, telling stories and reading stories. To tell you honestly, it's when you see the feedback, it's really instant. Totoo po yun, yung sinasabi ni Miss Bea. When you do storytelling, kasi I do storytelling already to cancer patients, kids, in a pedia ward. One, I have a storytelling session with a home for the aged. So kahit po matanda, we tell stories about family, about love, etc., etc. And you can see the feedback at that moment. Someone will cry, someone will laugh, someone will run, makikitakbo yan, naglalaro. Kasi if you are telling stories like si Pilong patago-tago, mamaya nagtatago na rin yung bata. So technically, there's an interaction with storytelling that would inspire kids and even other who would love to read. At in our case of storytellers, it's so fulfilling that money cannot pay to see those eyes with our listeners that they love the stories and they wanted to read and to listen more. So the stories goes beyond. The stories can heal. The stories can bring our listeners and even you, the storytellers, to a lot more of experience. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ma'am Bea and Sir Ken. Now let's have another question. Good afternoon daw. Sabi ni Jashel Kubian, what kind of stories do you usually recommend to non-readers? Sige, mag-start na naman tayo kay Sir Ken.
Okay, with me, maybe the book that I could recommend for you is to start storytelling books. Especially if you're a non-reader, I would recommend that because it's short, it's brief, So kung hindi ka fan ng mga makakapal na books, like for example, you have Mitch Albom, diba? So kung non-reader ka, baka matakot ka kasi sa sobrang kapal. Kasi one thing sometimes a non-reader would makakita lang siya ng libro, then makapal, tinatamad na siyang magbasa. So maybe, based on my experience, I started reading storytelling books. Most of the time, it's 12 to 15 pages. So it's short, it's concise, but it's full of stories. Maybe you can start with that. And then look for your own preference in terms of reading. What do you want to read? What you love to know? If it's a fiction if it's romance, science fiction, and others. So it will depend on you. But if you have the chance to consult with your librarians, with your library, the better, because I know that your library has a good collections that you can check into and look for a book that you wanted to read. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Sir Ken. Ma'am Bea?
Your question is a very tricky question. What kind of stories do you usually recommend to non-readers?
Yes.
That's a little hard to answer, but let me give you this tip. I don't know if you are a librarian or not. I don't know where you're coming from, but if you're a librarian or a teacher struggling
BLI
to
student.
Yeah, it's a student. Yeah,
a student.
Today.
So if you are a student in library science and you're preparing for this, let me just give you this tip. Librarians are like profilers. I don't know if you watch those crime movies. We're profilers, you know. In other words, we have to, well, not stalk, but we have to kind of read the person who doesn't want to read, and we kind of have to figure out their past. Like, why don't you like reading? What happened to you before? Is it because you've never been introduced to reading? Is it because you don't have access to books? Is it because of the language? Is it because of your interests? What are you more interested in? So we're kind of like profilers, criminal. Well, non-readers are not criminals, but you get the gist. Okay, so try to read the person who is a non-reader, or if it's yourself, kind of try to find out. You know, reading is not it's not an elitist act. Okay, it's an everyday common thing. And what kind of stories do you like to hear? Then look for those stories. Believe me, there is every story for every kind of reader. There is like the stories that are available. It's numerous. Okay, there's stories for every kind of reader. So if you don't know, if you have an idea what you want to read but you don't know where to find it, go ahead and ask a librarian. Your librarian should know. And that's why librarians, you should read also, so that you will know when you are asked on the spot. Okay, so the kind of story will depend really on the age and background of the reader. If it's a kid, if it's a young kid and they're a non-reader, we'll give them books with a lot of colors. Okay, and then maybe start it by verbally telling them the story, because they want to hear it, and then when they hear it, they get interested. Show them books with illustrations. If they're older readers, kind of like the same thing. You engage with them. You know, in my classes, I always tell stories. I always have like a story for when I see that, okay, my students are losing interest. I always digress into a story related to the topic, but still a story from a book that I've picked up. And they always go, yay, it's story time. And they're big. They're like senior high school, undergraduate students. So you have to kind of just know the age, the background, and then, you know, like try to suit it to them. And most important, no, be enthusiastic. When you are recommending a book, be very enthusiastic. Don't say, Kani, this is nice. You can be a little, we have to project. So you can go, oh, this book, I really love this book. It's so exciting. And I couldn't sleep for, I had many sleepless nights trying to finish this book. You be enthusiastic, because they're going to catch that kind of enthusiasm from you also. That's all.
Galing. That's why I envy those who are really wide readers, because I am not that really into reading mga fiction books. I'm more on reading magazine articles, mga newspaper articles, mga short articles. But thank you so much, Sir Kevin and Ma'am Bea. Now let's have another question. We have here from Miss Mary Jean Tubo, our BLS student. Please give us tips how to become a good storyteller daw. Sige, start tayo kay Ma'am Bea.
Tips to be a good storyteller. Well, you know, I was a student under Miss Lorna Eguia. She used to be the American Corner Librarian at the University of San Carlos. And she is also one of the board of trustees and ambassadors. And she always told us to know our story beforehand. And I think that's very important. There are many kinds of ways to tell a story. We can read from the book, but I think even when I read from a book, I find it is better to just know the story beforehand. Because sometimes the text in a book is too long, and I find it's better to just cut the sentences short. So you need to be able to know the story beforehand.
Video. Tapos, ato ang ihatag ang
So I think that's the most important tip that I can give. Be very familiar with your story so that you know like how to cut it short, and then you know how to create that like tension in the reader, like when to turn the page, when to make your voice sound hushed and excited so that they're sitting on the edge of their seats and wondering, okay, what happens next? So you have to be able to do that. So read your story, be familiar with it, know when to turn the page, when not to turn the page. I think this is the most important tip that I can give to be a good storyteller.
Okay. Sir Ken?
Okay. I think that's what Ms. Bea said was actually the most important thing. Be ready, be prepared before you go with storytelling, because it's very important for you to understand all aspects of the material that you're going to tell so that you can relay the story well to your listeners. Another would be tell stories with your heart. So when I say with your heart, in preparing, you try to put yourselves in the story so that when you tell it, it's like that you are part of the story. So anyone from the listeners would experience, and most likely through your stories, could feel that you are really part of that story. So that's the one that is very important in storytelling. Aside from having that voice, this is another thing. You should also prepare your voice, because when we do storytelling, it's not always in a closed door room. It's not always in a four-wall classroom. Sometimes we do storytelling in open areas, like what we did. We have one in the seashore, one in an open area in a mountain, and the like. So before anything else, before you do your storytelling, be prepared. Aside from the story, you should know at least where is the venue, so that you can prepare. You don't need to have that you don't need to have that loud voice or big voice with you. So kung hindi ka man ganun kalakas ang boses, so knowing the venue and knowing what to tell a story, you can prepare. So you can maybe try to ask a microphone or a lapel mic for you to use when you do storytelling. But overall, when you do storytelling, tell story with your heart, tell story that you really like, so that you can tell that story outstanding. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Di ba may mga story din, sir, na they're using their own mother tongue, like for a specific dialect?
Yeah, actually there is. And we would encourage to use the mother tongue or the lingua franca, we say it, in other areas of the country, especially as we know, the DepEd has this mother tongue based language on the classes, on subjects until grade 2, I think. So if you are in an area with a lingua franca or a mother tongue language, the better if you have it. But not all publications has its translation, right? So we have this type of storytelling, which is tandem storytelling. I've seen this quite a lot of time with my storyteller friends. When we do tandem storytelling, it has to be have two storytellers. One will read the original language or tell the story in the original language based on the book, and the second one will translate it on the mother tongue if the book is not available in its mother tongue language. But as far as I know right now, there's a move with the publishers like Adarna and Lampara. They are trying to translate books written in Filipino and English to other languages. Maybe there is already a Cebuano collection for or a Cebuano language, or in your case, a Bisaya or what. So the better if you can use it. So again, maybe you try to check again and again who will be your listener so that you can prepare well on what to tell, what story to tell, and then what language to use when you do a storytelling activity.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, we have another question. Okay pa ba tayo? Okay pa ba kayo, sir, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Still okay.
Okay, another question, sir, from Jo Marie Sinegras. I think he's a BSBA student. Sabi niya, please suggest me a good book to read. Kasi yung genre niya daw is more on adventure. Ang dami ah. Adventure, action, romance, and dark humor. Sino mauna? Sige. Si Ma'am Bea kasi nakasmile.
Okay, Jo Marie, let me profile you. If you want, you can email me so that I can so that I can ask you more questions. Then I can try to fit a recommendation list to suit your interests also. I will send my email address in this chat box. I hope that's okay with you because I don't want to get it wrong. I really want to give you a book that you're going to like. So I'll give you my email ad here, and then feel free to message me, and then so that I can get better idea of what kind of adventure or what kind of books you've already read, and like if there's any particular author that you're interested in, so that I can suggest a similar one, or even how old you are, so I can get a little background information. I hope that's okay. So here's my email ad. Thank you.
Tama nga naman. Reference interview muna.
Yeah.
Sige, ma'am. Thank you so much, Ma'am Bea. Sir Ken?
Okay. Unfortunately, with that certain subject, I cannot really suggest directly of what to read on that certain topics because first and foremost, sorry to say, but I'm not that reader into that subjects. That's one. And then a second, I'm not working in a library itself. So I don't have any idea for now of what would be the best recommendation of a good book for you. I think with Miss Bea, she can help you with your queries. I'm sorry, I cannot share with that question, but maybe your librarians also have a good fiction collection that could be checked. So you can check your OPAC. The first thing to do, check your OPAC and do checking fiction collection, and maybe you can find the one. Thank you.
Guys, for the information of everybody, librarians are not that really like database, a database. But they're using strategies, techniques, and tools in order to retrieve the information that you want. Sige, sir. Okay. Sige, email nyo daw si Ma'am Bea, or you at least send an email also to Sir Ken.
Yeah, you can.
Mr. Senegras. Okay, thank you so much, Ma'am and Sir. Now, we have another question. What are your tips to make those people to inspire again, those people who stopped reading to start and love reading again? Sir Ken?
Okay. Did I wait for a while?
That's from Miss Contessa Abadio.
Okay. They are a reader before and then they stop reading. So how can we encourage them to read again? Tama? Tama,
Yes,
no?
sir. Yes, sir.
I think you go back to the books that you have read before and you start maybe reading it again so that you can bring back your enthusiasm and your love for reading. And another, I would really suggest you go with your library collection and find a good book that you wanted to read. So little by little, there's no rush na ibalik mo agad. So technically, just do as little actions to go back and love reading. And um, what I do when I wanted to encourage myself and to inspire myself to read, I watch TED Talks about the power of reading. I watch different videos and documentaries and TED Talks about what's what's the benefit from reading, what's the importance of reading, an inspiring story in reading, and through that, I was inspired and encouraged to do so. So I start reading again and reading again. So maybe same thing with you, Contessa. It's sometimes I forgot to read na rin because of a lot of things that I need to prioritize. But I always make sure that I have my books at my back so that it will be a reminder for me that sometimes sit down, have a coffee, and then read your book again. Build your environment that you have books present to your life. They always say that pag nakikita nga ng mga friends ko yung books ko, they keep on saying, nabasa ko na ba yan lahat? Technically speaking and honestly speaking, my dear listeners, hindi ko po yan nababasa lahat. Why am I collecting? Because I wanted to remind myself that there are good books in my back, that anytime I can grab it and read it. So I'm just putting it on my personal shelf so that anytime that I would like to read and I would like to be inspired with the books that I collect, it's always here at my back and it's present. So that's what I'm investing right now and trying to encourage myself to read more and more. And I think that could be also a little inspiration to me. Thank you.
Tama, sir. All the time, andyan lang yung books, hindi yan X. Pwede mo siya balikan. Okay, Ma'am Bea.
Thank you for your question. It's something that I really relate to because this happened to me. I read a lot, but when I was like 18 or maybe in my last year of college, I kind of hit a reading dead end where I would pick up a book and it just wouldn't interest me. Part of it was because my eyes were hurting a lot. I couldn't read for 5 minutes without like my eyes I would just cry because they would hurt a lot. So that was part of the reason. But other than that, I also seemed to just have reached a dead end where books couldn't really interest me. As a librarian, I like to arrange my books from time to time. We change away, we turn around how we arrange our books. Sometimes we do it by color, sometimes we do it by height. My personal favorite, I like to arrange my books according to my date of acquisition. So when I arrange it according to like the last book I bought. Of course, now that I have a lot of books, it's a little hard to do that. You just put it wherever space is available. But before, I used to arrange it according to date of acquisition. And I really saw that there is a progression in the kind of books that I read. So before, I would read American classics, British classics. And that was what happened to me at 18, I think. I think I had read myself into a corner where the plot seemed to be repetitious. The writing style was not that exciting for me anymore. And eventually I discovered a new kind of literature, like for example, Colette, the way she wrote. It wasn't the normal standard way of writing. It wasn't even the kind of character that I usually read. And there was just something about that sentence she wrote, these white anemic blooms, that was so beautiful, it was so poetic. It was so different from what I usually read. So that was kind of what helped me get over that reading death or dearth for me. So I recommend that if you find yourself caught in that, try to look for other kinds of literature. Perhaps you had already read too much of that literature. So try to look for something different. Like for me, I discovered Latin American literature. They have a lot of magic realist techniques in the writing, and it's very colorful. It's very mosaic. It's very different from what I'm used to reading. So I really recommend that you do that, or perhaps turn your genre around. Perhaps you're used to reading novels, and then you're older now and working, and you don't have the time for the novels. So that's why maybe you can't seem to read again. So why don't you try reading short stories or novellas? So try to explore. Believe me, there's so much that can be read, and we also change as readers. So we also have to change the kind of literature that we're reading from time to time. So try to do that, and try to arrange your books also according to the date of acquisition. You will also think, okay, I stopped here. There was a time when I just couldn't read any more of this book. So you can see later on that you progress to a different kind of literature. So you can also keep that. If you're a librarian, you might be interested in doing that. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Bea. Another question. We have here from Roxanne Sigahan. To organize. Wait, what are the obstacles we encounter in storytelling, and how do you manage to find remedy in battling these obstacles?
Okay, I'd like to share a very personal experience with this one. I think one of the hardest thing in storytelling is management. When I was younger, we had a cousin, the same cousin who would teach me a lot of beautiful but useless words, who loved to tell us stories. And there were so many of us cousins. There were 10 of us, and she's, I think, 10 years older than us. And her problem, and I found this also my problem now as a storyteller, how do I get kids to sit down and just listen and not interrupt? That's
Yes.
very my cousin would often resort to blackmail. She would tell me, if you ask one more question, like the end of the story, I'm not gonna finish it. But of course, we can't do that, no? So as storytellers, I think that's one of the biggest obstacles that we face. So it's very important that before you start telling the story, you kind of try to set some rules. There's a very interesting story that I read many years ago. It's a novel. It's called The Lord of the Flies. And it's a story about a group of boys that are are on a plane to go on a trip, but that plane crashes into an island. So can you imagine an island with no adults and they're full of little boys? It's pandemic, it's chaotic, okay? They're talking over each other. So one of the kids said that, you know what, we have to have some order. So here is a shell. He picked up a shell from the beach and he said, whoever holds this shell can ask a question. Okay, he's the only one who can speak, whoever holds the shell. You cannot interrupt until the shell is passed on to you. So I find that that is a very good example. We can do that when we tell our stories. You can have an object, and kids, they actually respond to this. You can have an object, and you can say, whoever holds this can ask a question. So I'm holding it now, and therefore only I can speak. When I am done and ready, I'm going to pass this shell on to whoever's raising their hand, and I'm only going to pass it to the person who's raising her hand so that you can ask your question. So you can try to create some dynamics to when you're telling a story. I think that's one of the biggest obstacle, because when we're in the middle of a story and a kid interrupts with a useless information, which kids tend to do, it's hard to go back to the story. So setting parameters and rules are very important.
Sir Ken?
Yeah, actually, that's the most challenging part here, how you can get the attention of the kid.
Yes, I mentioned that.
Actually, this is the usual challenge of every storyteller. It's just that I'm not so sure if you know me personally. I have a really loud and big voice. Kaya dinadaan ko na lang sa malakas na boses para abot hanggang dulo. But when someone, or based on experience and observation, majority of the storytellers who don't have that big voice and loud voice, nahihirapan talaga sila to keep the attention of all. And some of my storyteller friends do is that they start with the song. They start with an action song to everyone that everyone will join together in singing before starting a a story. Another thing is that they start with activity that maybe a game that is related to the story to be told after. So those are some things that they do before they do storytelling so that they can get the attention because most of the time really it's the attention that is very challenging on storytelling, especially if it's an open area. Kapag nasa labas and very crowded. To tell you, one of the biggest storytelling activity that I've been into was it's a theater storytelling. Talagang it's a crowd. So the good thing na lang, syempre, they have this good sound system and the like, and we're able to get the attentions of everyone. But if wala siyang microphone or the like, mahirap siyang i-organize o mahirap siyang gawin. So there are things naman to get the attention. If you don't have that deep voice or loud voice, you can use your microphone and lapel mic so that you can get the attention of the kids. And at the same time, always be excited para ma-excite din yung mga bata. Always be excited in telling your story so that even the listeners would be excited for you to listen. So that's most likely the challenge in storytelling. And I would add maybe this time, the traditional storytelling would be a challenge also because we cannot do it. We cannot do it the way that we do it before because of the pandemic. So there's a lot of ways to do storytelling now online. They have interactive storytelling and the like. So the transitioning of physical storytelling and then going to the online storytelling. So there's a lot of things that we need to check into so that we can provide and give a good storytelling experience. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Ken. Indeed, yung attention talaga yung pinakamahirap po din, sir. No? Sa akin naman yung challenge ko is paano maging friendly yung mukha ko while doing the storytelling. Paano siya mag-look na kind or di ba may mga ganun, sir, na mahirap i-practice.
That's why if you're a storyteller, you need to be an actor at the same time.
Yes.
That's what you need to prepare. Don't tell story kung bad siya or like you're not in a good mood. Mahirap siya if may pinagdadaanan ka. Like for example, you have this story activity and then something happened back home or something happened along the way. It's hard to do a storytelling. Para lang yung comedians, diba? We keep on giving etc. Pero mahirap siya gawin if you're not in good mood and the like. So better if you have a scheduled storytelling activity, prepare and have at least 2 hours na good mood before the storytelling activity para maganda din yung storytelling experience ng mga listener mo.
Tapos sabihin mo mga bata, tahimik! I'm just kidding. Okay, sir. We have here another question from Miss Jessa De Jesus. Sabi niya, para to the both of you, sir, ma'am, what motivates you to become a good storyteller daw?
Okay, if it's okay, I'll answer this because I'll answer first because I have to go already.
Yes, okay lang po.
What motivates me to become a good storyteller? I think it's just having all the stories that I have read. I just want to share them. They give me so much pleasure, and I know that they will give others so much pleasure too. Not just, and it's a pleasurable way of learning as well. So, for others, like if you're a writer, you're also a storyteller. You're also writing stories to tell. For me, I'm not a writer, but I am just a reader. So I like to share the stories that others have written because I think they're beautiful and I think they're very helpful. And if it's something that you really enjoy, you will want to share it. So that's really my answer. It gives me pleasure. I know it will give pleasure to others. So thank you very much, and I'm so sorry that I have to leave a little early.
It's okay, Ma'am Bea. It's okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Ms. Bea.
Nice to meet you again, Sir Kevin. I actually met you like maybe 2 years ago. And thank you, Miss,
Oh,
for the
thank you.
invitation. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you
Ingat,
very much,
Ma'am
Ms.
Bea.
Bea.
Sir Kevin?
Yeah, with the question that what motivates you to become a good storyteller, most likely it's the smiles from the listeners. It's um, the fulfilling experience that after telling stories, the kids or anyone who listen to us love it. It's very fulfilling for me to see someone who laughed with my story, who cries with my story, even though it's sad. But technically speaking, when you reach that point that when you're telling a story and then you were able to touch their heart, that's very fulfilling and that motivates me a lot to tell more stories. Same with Miss Bea, it's better also to share the stories that you are telling. One experience that I have when I'm doing storytelling and I have this copy of the book that I told, I give it to a kid who would love to have that copy because it's very important that through that you can encourage her or him in doing reading as his hobby or his pastime, or if you wanted it to be as an entertainment on the times that he or she doesn't have things to do. So what motivates really is that the feeling of that fulfillment that when you see someone or a listener from your stories became happy, inspired, and at the same time fulfilled also. So through that, it's kind of motivates me a lot to continue telling stories. And your story needs to be told. Unlike aside from the books that we have, aside from the publications that we read in storytelling books, your story also needs to be told because your story your story may it be sad or happy, it could also help someone, it could also inspire someone, and maybe that story will help them to be successful in the future. So that keeps me on being motivated, and I think one above all, because we have this talent that was given by God, so we need to really maximize and share it to others. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Ken. I think wala na tayong questions. I guess wala na. Now let's have the closing remarks. Okay. Okay, for the webinar evaluation form, for the information of everyone, you have to fill out the provided link na nasa chat box natin so that you can get your certificate. And then now let's proceed to the next part of our program, our webinar, which is the closing remarks to be given by Ms. Marietta T. Antone.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So we can now end our webinar. First of all, I would like to congratulate the 4 successful webinar hosted by the Learning Resource Center headed by our head librarian, Ms. Rinel R. Salem. I believe that all of you have a great time to listening to our dear speakers. I hope that the knowledge that you gain in this webinar, you can design or make it another intervention program to help others in coping life changes to your designated library services. Because of our situation today, our patron cannot set us face to face, and as a librarian, we're trying our best, our very best, to make our library still functioning and to make essential to our patrons. And we need to bring our story or our services to them. On behalf of the LRC team and our head librarian, Ms. Rinel R. Salem, I would like to express to thank my appreciation our distinguished speakers for their time and sharing their knowledge to us, Ms. Bea Martinez and Mr. Kevin Conrad Sanchanco, and also to
to our dear participants from different places around the world. Charot. Around the world talaga. So even though you are so busy, your own duties, but still you're joining us in this webinar. Thank you. I would like to end this message with this quote: live, create, tell the story, repeat. According ni Mr. Kevin, we have a lot of story in ourselves. May kwenta ang kwento mo. So thank you once again, and advance Merry Christmas, everyone. Keep safe, to be the glory with God. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Ken. Thank you so much, Mama Mariette, for being our Suki here, Sir Kevin.
Thank you very much. Anytime.
And I would like also to say thank you to all participants who are with us right now, the BLI students, our BSBA students, kasi I've invited my students also sa BSBA. They're here. And then our faculty members. Thank you so much for being with us to learn something about storytelling and reading. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Kevin.
Thank you, Ma'am Ren.
See you next time po.
Yeah, let me know anytime. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin. Bye-bye. Lain kay Tingog. Ay, sorry.